speak to Dominic Walsh, who's in London. He's a policy analyst at the think tank Open Europe. Well, thanks for taking time to speak to us here on the programme. Well, Angela Merkel says she wants Britain's departure from the EU to be as smooth as possible. Can we take it that she doesn't have the backstop on her mind?
I don't think there's any real prospect of significant movement from Angela Merkel on the backstop today. It seems that Boris Johnson is launching a diplomatic offensive with EU leaders ahead of Sunday's G7 summit. He's also meeting French President Emmanuel Macron tomorrow. And it is interesting that he's chosen to go and meet her because previously the UK government had insisted that they wouldn't even meet with EU leaders unless they agreed to scrap the backstop in advance. But I don't think many people on either side of the channel are expecting a major breakthrough today.
So how do you think Boris Johnson is going to approach these discussions?
I think he'll repeat some of the demands that he made in his letter to President Tusk on Monday. But he might also, I think it's quite likely that he'll raise some of the issues that Germany would face in a no-deal Brexit as an attempt to persuade Angela Merkel to use her influence to acquiesce to some of his demands. It's the so-called German car makers argument, the idea that a no-deal Brexit would introduce new barriers to trade between the UK and the EU, and those would fall particularly hard on Germany. The German economy is not doing on the verge of recession at the moment, but I think it's a mistake to think that that means that Germany would cave to demands to scrap the backstop, because it's been clear for some time that while Germany doesn't want a no-deal Brexit, they prioritise EU solidarity and the integrity of the single market over their trade with the UK.
Well, as you mentioned there, these recession fears are hanging over Germany right now, but she's under tremendous pressure, isn't she, Angela Merkel, from business leaders as well as trade associations. So what do you think it is that she will want to get out of this meeting?
I think she'll want to sort of suss out the new UK Prime Minister who she's going to have to deal with. I think she might want to, there's probably a perception in the EU that a lot of Johnson's rhetoric around Brexit and the backstop is partly intended for domestic consumption. So she would probably want to kind of, see what it's like to meet him one-to-one, and see whether he's bluffing. I think she might also want to see what he thinks about the prospects of Parliament blocking a no-deal Brexit, and whether that will be a constraint on the British side of things.
Also, how do you think the fact that Boris Johnson, some might say, has been cozying up to Donald Trump? Of course, this relationship between them is well known. How do you think that's going to go down?
I think that's something else that might be on the agenda as well. I think it's kind of a sort of second-order concern ahead of Brexit, but it was interesting that that Johnson made significant overtures to Trump as soon as he came into power. And it was always before Johnson came in, a lot of EU diplomats were saying that it will be really interesting to see where he goes first. And he's famed closeness to Donald Trump, and whether a Brexit would lead to under Johnson would lead to a kind of strategic pivot from the UK away from the EU and towards the US. But it's kind of that can't really happen until the UK has left the EU. So it's kind of several steps down the line for now.
Dominic Walsh.